Becoming the first apex predator ever is certainly an impressive accolade, and Anomalocaris likely holds that title. But in many ways, becoming the second is substantially more impressive, especially if you consider that your direct descendants are still killing things in the ocean almost 500 million years later. Today we're introducing Cameroceras, one of the primordial world's first megabuilds, and a monster that really has seen very little to compete with it since. But was it as apex and predatory as it looked? Cameroceras was one of the largest cephalopods to have ever existed, a shallow water giant squid, hidden inside an ice cream cone. And in this video, we're going to investigate how it gained such a tentacle hold on its environment, how its lineage survived through multiple mass extinction events. To get to grips with it all, we have to expand our minds back over 500 million years ago, to the dawn of the most successful animals on the planet, the cephalopods. It's thought that predation by a single-celled organism is maybe what drove the evolution of multicellular organisms sometime later. The first predators, therefore, were microbes, and we could write an entire video on just how long ago that may have been. The most recent estimates place it at around 600 million years ago, though it's much more likely to have been at least twice as far back as that, and potentially staggeringly more so. Regardless, it set off an arms race, and by the Cambrian, widespread multicellular life had well and truly taken over. Lots of soft things existed. The preceding Ediacaran period had seen to that, but after almost 100 million years of their decline at the end of the Ediacaran, the Cambrian would usher in a world of hard things. In the Cambrian, we find the greatest evolution of shells. Almost everything that existed was still fully aquatic, and almost everything else wanted to eat it, so shells became a great way to both float and not be chewed on. Further, there was a pulsing introduction of calcium into the water for some reason, so shells would act as a way for animals to process it quickly without getting constipated. That Ediacaran extinction coincided with an increase in burrowing animals, which also benefit from shells, and arthropods, with an exoskeleton that was likely responsible for more than its fair share of shell evolution. Anomalocaris was sort of a 30-centimeter long fish scorpion with legs and praying mantis arms, similar to a swimming antlion larva or a more mobile sarlacc. As one of the first ever apex predators, it would likely have fed mostly on soft-bodied animals like the cephalopods. And thus began the Cambrian explosion. An explosion is quite a generous term for something that took 13 to 20 million years, but when condensing time into the 50-plus million years of the Cambrian period, it's certainly something that happened quickly. For cephalopods, this meant an increase of over 30 genera identified so far, all responding to predation from arthropods and the abundance of food burrowing into the sediment, which likely also led to longer tentacles. But of those genera, only 2 survived into the next period. Perhaps even more significant to life today than the Cambrian explosion was the End-Cambrian extinction event, which wiped out almost everything that didn't look familiar to us. The proceeding Ordovician would become the catchment tray beneath the great filter that allowed most of the modern animal lines we know of today to thrive. Among them were the 2 genera of cephalopods that would descend into all such species we share the planet with now. Slight side note here, this is almost certainly not the full picture. There were only 2 shelled cephalopods to have made it through the net, as far as we know, but it's a lot harder to find the fossils of the squishy ones. Regardless, these basal cephalopod genera diverged into multiple orders of cephalopod, including a diverse and long-shelled one called Endocerida. They arrived early in the Ordovician and were peaking midway through, around 470 million years ago, and a lot of that peak is because of Cameroceras. The first thing that's so striking about Cameroceras is its size. While it's been downgraded significantly in terms of size estimates of the past decade or so, this downgrade still leaves it packing an almost 6-meter shell. There are rumors of a 9-meter specimen that miraculously nobody can find, so almost 6 meters is about the best we can support here. 5.7 meters to be more specific, of long, conical and hollow shell that would have jutted away from its head. The head, of course, is still speculative, but these appear to have been shallow water monsters, and so they're easy to picture as armored octopuses. perusing the reefs for crabs and other crunchy things. Of course, there were no crabs, as they hadn't been invented, and they wouldn't be for another 200 million years or more, but there were lots of other arthropods and burrowing shellfish. So Cameroceras may have become one of the world's largest predators at the time, if not the largest, around 60% of the longest squid today, but with a head and perhaps tentacles of unknown length on top of that. Given that a giant squid's head and tentacles make up the majority of its length, it's possible that Cameroceras was much longer. Before we go too deep into what's possible, let's look at what's most likely. Cameroceras was a cephalopod, that's almost certain. It had a chambered shell, probably perfectly conical, with a wide strand of tissue linking all the chambers longitudinally. This siphuncle is found in modern nautiluses and even cuttlefish, and it's used to balance buoyancy and control depth. Cameroceras itself is thought to have been a nautiloid, and the ancestral form to nautiluses and their friends the allonautiluses that we have today. Extrapolating from this brings us some idea of what the squishy bits might have been like. The biggest and youngest chamber of this huge cone would likely have housed the relatively short mantle, and protruding from this, tentacles would have emerged from the base of the head. These were multi-purpose appendages, the number of which can't be known, but all would likely have been handy for drawing a hapless crunchy victim into a powerful and hardened beak at the center. So what did it eat? To figure that out, there are several things to consider. Let's look at the ecosystem of the time. The Ordovician was the period of migration for the supercontinent Gondwana, which had formed in the Ediacaran. Still not much going on land, but many of the oceans were shallow and warm and were home to a multitude of arthropods, vertebrates, and corals, among much else. Cameroceras, being essentially an enormous stick, likely wasn't all that maneuverable in the motion of the warm, shallow seas it occupied, and its ridged shell may have been one of the earliest substrates for algae, which too were beginning to arrive on the scene at the time. So Cameroceras may have drifted with the currents, perusing the warm reefs, plucking up invertebrates to crush in its mouth as it did so. Or it could have used its sensitive eyes to skulk about in the dark, creeping up to the larger animals and pouncing on them while they're sleeping with a burst of tentacle. The sheer abundance of its fossils suggests that whatever it was doing it well. But this abundance has also created speculation about another option. Perhaps it was a plankton feeder. Modern nautiluses are the closest we have left to Cameroceras today, and they potter about adorably, nibbling on tiny animals and organic matter. Could the largest cephalopod of the Ordovician have been a peaceful filter feeder? We may never know. It's likely to have been opportunistic and varied in its predation and scavenging habits. And this leads us to our final point. Another group of animals shared their space with this monster creature, and we're directly descended from some of them. Before we look at how that relationship may have worked out, we want to say thanks for watching. At the time of writing, we've just hit 1,000 subscribers, and it's been a huge push to get the channel here, so we greatly appreciate your contributions, and at the risk of droning on, please subscribe if you haven't already and give the video a like so that others can hop on board and we can make more of them. So how did Cameroceras create humans? We may all know that the following period, the Devonian, is known as the Age of Fishes, and this is where bony fishes took over more or less everything. But the Ordovician was the period during which some of the scariest fish ever known began, the placoderms. Now, most placoderms weren't scary, but we'll come back to this in a moment. Placoderms are possibly ancestral to all bony fish species, including Sarcopterygians, which are a group of fishes to which we belong. We descend from a line of Sarcopterygians that were either brave or frightened enough to pull themselves out of the hostile waters and onto the land to take their chances with the giant bugs. And they descend from placoderms, who shared their origin story with Cameroceras. Could it be that less armor, better internalized skeletons, and faster reflexes were an adaptation to this colossal shelled nautilus that was eating all of our ancestors? A good adaptation to a lumbering Goliath is a sprightly and more agile David, and perhaps the dominance of the predation from animals like Cameroceras really drove the market in that regard. So next time you see a nautilus, consider how much harder it is to escape them in the water nowadays. Cameroceras and most of the cone-shelled cephalopods gave way to curled-shelled and internalized-shelled cephalopods, which allowed their lineages to descend to greater depths, and therefore survive extinction events better. Cameroceras itself lost the battle at the end of the Ordovician, as Gondwana settled at the bottom of the globe like an old contact lens, and many of its shallow marine habitats drained and dried up. Those bony fish were still there, though, and placoderms would survive well into the Devonian. The largest of them, Dunkleosteus, even perhaps became the next generation of apex marine predators, and we have a whole video on that, so check it out after this one. As for this video, thanks again for watching and taking the time. See you for the next one.